Welcome back to a bit Gamey, and another Mars video, which is rules and scenarios, and this one on the Battle of Ramillies in the War of Spanish Succession. Although that's quite specific, it's the actual meat of this is going to be sort of fairly general to taking a large battle, or a battle that's too large for your table, and splitting it into separate smaller battles which affect the end result. So it's kind of a general thing, really. So I just want to explain that from what the point of it was. So if you're not interested, you can skip out. But if you are interested, then this is what it's about. So originally, my plan for the War of Spanish Succession was looking at historical battles and picking out little pieces which could fit onto a small table. And I've been doing that, and that's still fine. But when I was reading about the Battle of Ramillies, I kind of got a bigger idea for regardless of the size of table. I mean, even if you had a 6x4 table, you could do something like this for a battle like this, which is kind of interconnected battles, so that winning one of the smaller battles would have an effect on a future one. So I'm saying in the Battle of Ramillies, it fits this really well. There's 4 sections to it. There's a battle on the right flank in the middle of this marshy village. There's a battle in the sort of right centre, which is like a giant cavalry battle because it's all flat plains. On the French left flank, there's another battle around this village Ultra-Église, which is in this hilly what you call it, I don't know, well, hills basically, hills with a little river cutting through it. So it's got a very steep valley that's not suitable for cavalry. And so it's a kind of infantry fight uphill in this kind of I don't know, dense terrain, but very uphill, rough terrain for that village over there. Okay, so the first battle is over a village in a swamp. The second or third is the one attacking over a village on the right flank, up a very steep hill. So both of those two are not very suitable to cavalry. The third battle is the one in the right centre, which is basically a giant cavalry battle because it's very open. And the fourth battle is the one for actually Ramillies itself, and which is slightly lower down, so it's not quite as rough as the one on the right. But that's the kind of climax. And the way to look at it is this first battle on the French right flank over a village in a swamp. So they've got the river on the right, which kind of blocks, acts as a kind of for the flank. It kind of covers the flank, and it's very marshy. So it's very bad terrain for cavalry, but it's a good a setting for this infantry battle over this village of Taviers. And the reason why it is useful for later on is then if whoever wins that battle, then you fight the giant cavalry battle next door adjacent to it, and then the winner of the first gets some kind of off table artillery or infantry fire. If the enemy cavalry comes too close to that edge, to the right edge, then they can take artillery fire or infantry fire, which so it just gives the other side an edge in that battle. And I'm thinking, going around in circles a bit, but in terms of the size of the table, for example, this one is red. Say you did have a 6x4 table, you might want to make that like 4x4 or something like that, slightly narrower, or 3x4 even, and just make it a slog over that village. And similarly, up on the right hand battle for Ultra-Église over this little jeet, you can make that 3x4 or 4x4. You wouldn't necessarily have, if you had a 6x4 table, you wouldn't necessarily have to You could do, of course, but you might want to make it smaller to make it sort of I don't know, just a thought. And then this big one in the middle in the cavalry battle, again, you could do that as a 6x4 or 4x4. It's mostly cavalry. So yes, there's the first battle over this village, and winning it gives an advantage on that third battle, the cavalry battle. That anything on the close to this village can get a shot in the flank from off table. It'd be like an kind of for whoever wins turn it is, if any of the enemy cavalry is within a certain distance, then you shoot them. So that's those two. The third battle is this valley is very steep, cut in by the river, and you have to kind of fight uphill against these guys defending on the ridge. So the way it affected the central battle at the end was the French guy. The attack was successful enough that the French guy sent reinforcements from the centre to his left. So the way to do that battle, you say you have tight, very steep terrain. Infantry coming from the Allied infantry coming from the right there, and you'd have a bunch of regiments in the reserve. So you set this up so that they're in the defensive positions, but they've got, say, 3 battalions or whatever in reserve, and the Allied force attacks, and you try and do it so that if the Allied forces win, then the French needs to use their reserve to plug gaps. So that would go on for a certain number of turns, and for every battalion that was needed, every reserve battalion that was needed to reinforce Ultra Église was one that he couldn't use in the final battle. So so I'm not explaining this very well. First battle, win or lose, the winner gets fire on the flank of the cavalry battle, which helps them, and then the winner of the cavalry battle gets spare cavalry to fight in the last battle. So there's maybe a bit of a better explanation. So the first battle affects the second, and the second affects the third. No, the fourth. So first battle affects the third affects the fourth. The second battle affects the fourth by how many of those reserve battalions are available to. You could have them, so that any of the reserve battalions that weren't used in that battle come in as reinforcements for the central battle. And similarly, the winner of the cavalry battle over here, when you get to the fourth battle, there's got some reserve cavalry battalions come on, like at turn 3 or whatever. So and the fourth battle is the main one for Ramillies and Office. You got it's got this kind of a swampy river thing in the middle, but it's not as steep, and so that's the battle that decides the end. So say if the French won there, they'd have loads of reinforcements coming from that direction, and if the French won on that side, they'd have reinforcements on that side as well. Whereas reverse, if the Allies soak up all those reserves, there won't be any coming into the fourth battle, and if they win the cavalry battle, then they'll have extra cavalry on the flank. So I don't know if that explains it very well. It's take historical battle, divide it into 4 chunks, and where the effect of each battle, the effect of each of the earlier battles has some effect on one of the later battles in a sequence. So I don't know if that's explained very well, but going right back to the beginning again by mistake, is the original plan was thinking of what I call a Hougoumont battle or a Le Haye battle, where you've got a famous historical battle like Waterloo, and you pick a piece of it and you fight that out, and you could fight that on a 6x4 or a 3x3 or whatever. So that's grabbing an interesting scenario out of historical battle. But this is I do like this idea. I'm sure it's been done before by loads of people, but I just particularly like this idea where you can create a historical battle out of a bunch of smaller ones, smaller and connected battles. So I don't know if that makes any sense at all, but it's I think it's pretty good. There's a couple of caveats to this from my point of view, which is both appealing and negative. One of the things that I find interesting about this era, the horse and musket era, and the kind of village fighting, is the idea that terrain is very dense around the village and can be quite open away from it. So one of the things that well, this is getting a bit esoteric, but suburbs, for a lot of history, suburbs were places where were quite intensively farmed, but for things like vegetables and orchards and stuff like that. So the suburbs of a village, in a lot of cases, were, I say, very densely packed with terrain and blocking terrain. Orchards and fields for vegetables and woodland for firewood and stuff. And particularly in this case of Taviers, in the middle of a swamp with a big enough river to the right of it that kind of blocks one flank. And that idea of this kind of densely packed urban terrain does appeal. So you'd have it on your table. Say it was a 4x4 table or whatever. You'd have your village in the baseline. Say a foot of urban actual like houses, but all a foot around it is all kind of densely packed with fields and hedges and walls and orchards and all that kind of stuff. So it's very much a terrain heavy, or kind of a half heavy terrain. Say very densely packed around the village itself, and then open further away. And that's quite appealing. I've seen some. I think it was what's the guy? Oh, I can't remember. There's a guy who does an interesting set of rules for slightly earlier than this. 1685. League of Augsburg. That's what it is. And I'm going to get his rules at some point. And one of his battle reports is all these very densely packed little hedges, fields, and them sort of scrabbling over the hedges and stuff. So that does appeal, and often when you look at these this kind of era, battles from this era, there's like lines and lines of infantry all marching across an open plain, and that is the case sometimes. But other times there's these big fights over villages where there's barricades and everything, and holes knocked in the walls for muskets and stuff. So the point being, that does appeal to me, having a battle like that, where it's very bad for cavalry and it's all scrabbling over walls and stuff. But at the same time, I don't really want to do the terrain for that just yet, because I'm doing terrain for the World War II. But I do think that's a very interesting idea. So it's a caveat, but it's not a negative caveat. It's an effort caveat. That creating that kind of dense villagey type terrain is on my list. Or since looking at this, it's on my list, but I'm not entirely sure I want to do it yet. So that's one, and that applies really to Taviers, both of the first two battles and the ones on Ultra Ramillies, because there's very, I don't know how you do. You do have a very steep battle. You can have maybe the Allied beginning line with just next to that river stream. And then you have a bunch of tiered things for the hills, and with the same situation around the village itself, where they've got dense terrain of orchards and stuff. So that's quite an involved setup, and it's not involved too much in I mean, part of it is just the same as Taviers, with the kind of suburb around the village being densely packed, but also there's the hills aspect. You wouldn't actually have to do hills if you wanted. You could just pretend it's just a steep slope. But otherwise, you want large chunks of I don't know, something that was tiered. So you had one big one there, and then another one there, and a third one. So you got these big chunks of chipboard or something to simulate the hills, or in my case, books. But anyway, so that's one caveat: the fact that the the terrain for this battle is kind of a bit more involved than I want to deal with straight away. And also the same thing as when you came to the last battle with Ramillies and Offers, they'd be the same. You have this suburban terrain around Ramillies itself, and then flat terrain to its right. So anyway, that's the thing that got me from this, is thinking about, say village suburbs being densely packed terrain around the village. Because it could just be a couple of houses, but all around it, a foot all around it is densely packed. And say the second caveat, which is also, it's not negative, but it's negative for me personally at the moment, is this giant cavalry battle. Because I was, using the 1 hour war games idea for my kind of horse and musket games, and that you have a fixed set of potential units, and you roll a dice for how many, and that gives you, and the set of units is 2 cavalry, 4 line infantry, 2 special infantry, 2 guns, and 2 cavalry. And so a battle with two cavalry on either side is not going to be very exciting. And so even on my on a big table it's more, but on my 3x3 table, my cavalry units are like 6 to 6 inches wide. So on a 3x3 table, that's maybe as a kind of minimum you want 4, and then maybe in 2 lines that'd be 8. So that's on each side. Each side needs 8 little six-figure units. And so on one level, that's very puts me off, because in my original plan is just going to be 2 units each. But on the other hand, it's quite appealing. I do quite like the idea of this giant cavalry. It won't be giant on my little table, but it will look relatively giant. And on a 6x4 or a 4x4 table, you could have a good old cavalry bust up if you had the figures. So I don't know. To say it's a caveat for me personally, but it's actually quite tempting. Because one of the things I was doing on the War of Spanish Succession is because my favourites comes from the Napoleonic era, in particular the old airfix French cuirassiers is actually my all-time favourite for this period. But the 1 hour war games, as I say, is you have 2. So I'm quite tempted to actually do that, is to get all my favourite Napoleonic regiments. I mean, you got the 4 original for the Spanish Succession, 2 for each army based on the 1 hour war games. But for this, I'm quite tempted to get some of my favourite Napoleonic units and paint them up and just use them as for this period, just as a thing, because I don't care. Well, I mean, I do care at one point, at one level, but another. It basically would give me an excuse to buy some French cuirassiers and Polish lancers or whatever, and then split that up into 2 units of 6. They generally come in boxes of 12, and so I split that up into 2 units of 6, and so 4 boxes would give me 8 units. So I don't know. So as well as getting some Napoleonic figures, cavalry, I could get for other horse and musket periods, or find some whatever metal Danish cavalry, I think. Whatever took my fancy. So I say it's a massive caveat at the moment, because I don't want to buy any new figures, because I've got loads of stuff. There's some various mistakes in the past that I want to paint up. But it does appeal, just getting a load of different cavalry figures from different periods that I like, and just having a giant cavalry bust up on a playing table. So yeah, so basically those are my 2 caveats, both of which are kind of negative at the moment, but positive generally. Little village fight battles, horse and musket, with very dense terrain around the village, and getting loads of cavalry from various periods for a giant cavalry bust up. So anyway, blah, those are my 2 caveats. But the general point is, some battles suit this being sorted into little chunks, and then you make sure then the winner of each chunk has an effect on a future battle, culminating in the final the final scenario at the end. So I don't know if that makes any sense to turn on, or is it any use to anyone. But that's my take on the Battle of Ramillies and how you can turn one giant battle into 4 smaller ones. Say, and even tiny ones on a 3x3 table, or big ones. They're big in themselves. 6x4 or 6x8 table, with a giant battle. But each of those giant battles is it's not the whole of the Battle of Ramillies. It's chunks of it, which collectively can turn into a good old game. So anyway, don't know if that's any use to anyone, but it's done. Okay, to a bit.